Welcome to Uptown Rumble, heavy music in the Bronx. My name is Steven Payne, director of the Bronx County Historical Society. Today is March 17th, 2025. And Russell, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
My name is Russell Wolinsky, born and bred in the Bronx, member of the legendary Sic F.
Great. Thank you for being here. And Russell, before we get into music or anything along those lines, why don't you start off by sharing whatever you know about your family history and background and how your family ended up in the Bronx?
Okay, well, my father was born and bred here in the Bronx. His parents were from what they always said was Russia, but when they died, we found out was Poland.
Of course, yeah.
And he grew up in the Bronx, and he met my mother when he was in the service up in Utica, New York, where she was born and bred, and she moved down to the Bronx.
Do you know what neighborhood that they lived in when they first got together?
I think I'm not sure, but the first place I remember
Yeah.
is on Hughes Avenue, right off of Tremont, just a couple of blocks from Tremont, and that's where kind of my musical pop history begins for me personally.
Okay.
Because when I was a baby, I was born in 1954, and I was a baby during the Great Doo-Wop years.
Sure.
And literally, it wasn't just a story. Every block had a doo-wop group on the corner.
Yeah.
And my block was Hughes Avenue, and the next block east was Belmont Avenue.
Sure.
So in front of Marty Katz's Deli on Hughes Avenue were Deanna and the Belmonts,
Of course.
and that was my lullaby at infant, and
It's incredible.
it stayed with me. I can go on and on about this, but it just stayed with me, and I always wondered if it was the truth or I was just remembering something. But I did have the pleasure to meet Dion and did question him about it. And he goes, "No, you're right."
Right there
I
in the
wasn't too
corner.
happy about hearing about it, but he figured, "Oh, you're right."
Wow. Wow. So, what are some of your other earliest memories in that neighborhood?
Quite a bit. But I remember. You want to start with music?
Yeah, let's
In,
start with
in, tho-
music.
in those days, transistor radios were the thing,
Sure.
and everybody had a little transistor, 4 transistor, 6 transistor radio, and so did I. And every radio was tuned to ABC. I mean, later on, I got into MCA and others, but that's another story. That's another story. But ABC. So I grew up on songs like Locomotion.
Sure.
The neighborhood was changing. It was I don't know what the opposite. I don't know what you would call it exactly, but it was becoming very Puerto Rican, very Latin,
Sure.
mostly Puerto Rican at that time.
Yeah.
And so there would be incidents, but it you didn't really notice it at the time. You knew it was there, but you just thought this is the norm.
Yeah.
My parents didn't think so though. So they want it was as soon as it started getting like urban flight, but they had short wings, I guess, because they only made it to the North Bronx, the Gun Hill projects instead of the suburbs.
Sure. Sure. And how old were you at the time?
I was 10. It was I'm trying to think. No, December 3rd. Yeah, okay. So it was 2 weeks after JFK was assassinated
Okay. Okay.
that we moved. We moved to the 13th floor,
Wow. Wow.
and they lived there for 10 years.
Wow. Okay. So that's where I'm sure a lot of your most formative memories come from.
Well, that's where I met people like Scott Kempner and Dick Manitoba, and we
Sure.
became very, very close for a long, long time.
Sure.
We both, we got. I bonded with Scott particularly on Marvel Comics and the Beatles.
I see. I see. I see. I see. Um, well, before we get more into your time at the Gun Hill houses, let's spend some more time, on your childhood home. And why don't you talk some about, say, any games that you used to play either in the street or in your apartment building, whatever you might remember about, ways that you would have fun as a child.
It's kind of funny. I was just watching. I'm a little late to the party here. I was watching the first episode of The Plot Against America,
Okay, sure.
which takes place right before World War II, and a lot of the games that they were playing were games that we played. We played Scully. We
Of
played
course.
Off the Wall. We played King Queen, or Down the River, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Played Hot Peas and Butter, which was a violent game of the night with a belt. I'm sorry.
Yes, that's right.
Hot Peas and Butter, go get your mother.
Wow.
And the girls played Potsy, and they played with dishes.
Sure.
And I remember one of the worst things that could happen to a guy in the neighborhood was to get corralled in by Barbara Rosenberg, and she wanted to play house. Literally house, not the more kind of pornographic or like, I mean, the plastic dishes were out, the set all set up. Little bakery, little oven.
That's funny.
And I don't know how we got hooked into it, but every once in a while, everybody kind of got hooked in at least once playing
You did
house
your time.
with Barbara Rosenberg. And she wasn't anything particularly, she wasn't political or beautiful or anything like that.
Yeah. That's funny. And, I know you mentioned that there were more Puerto Ricans moving to the neighborhood during this time. What else do you remember about the people in the neighborhood? Family, friends, neighbors?
My best friend in those years was named Gussie Nabel.
Okay.
And it's kind of funny, I don't remember that much about him except the story of us going to the Bronx Zoo and getting in a lot of trouble for staying way too long.
Is that a story you want to share? That sounds like
Sure.
an interesting story.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I almost got killed.
Oh, boy.
By my mother.
Yeah.
We left in the morning. We go to the Bronx Zoo. This was the days when the Bronx Zoo was free.
Sure.
And you can just walk in there. And I thought I was clear with my parents I'd be back for dinner. My mother assumed I'd be back for lunch. So when we waltzed in back home at 5 o'clock, no cell phones, no way of getting a hold of somebody, she freaked out, thought I was dead, and said, "You never leaving my sight again." And she held on to that for a couple of days. Lasted a couple of days. Then there were the Sullivan brothers, who were not much to say about them, but there were a lot of them. And there were a lot of Sullivan. I don't remember how many exactly. I mean, to this day.
Yeah.
I'll be talking about something like, the conversation would be like about Broad Channel or something weird like that. Go, yeah, and everyone's named Sullivan. It was Connie Newman, who was technically the first woman I slept with.
Okay.
Her father was a drunk. He worked in the bar on 3rd Avenue in Tremont.
Sure.
And every once in a while, he wouldn't come home, or he'd come home drunk and abusive. So Connie slept with us.
Yeah.
Slept in my bed.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, she was technically the first woman. And years later, I ran into her on Fordham Road.
Yeah.
And I said, wow, I missed a chance here. I mean, we were like almost high school students by this point.
Sure. And with the other adults in the neighborhood, was it the kind of neighborhood where, say, if you did something bad a couple blocks away, that it would get back to your parents before you got home?
Yeah, I mean, now it's not as strongly as you see it depicted.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, because there was no air conditioning, so everybody was out in the summer.
Yeah.
And everybody saw everything.
Yeah.
So it was natural if somebody was doing something really, really awful.
Yeah, sure.
Which, the only I can't even think of what the most awful thing you would do in sight of parents. I mean,
yeah,
the older kids that wanted to go sniff glue or something like that would go to the park. And yeah, I can remember, walking to the park myself and seeing all these empty glue tubes on the ground.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a morbid fascination. Was it? What this is like?
Yeah, for sure. Now, you may have been too young, although not necessarily at this point, but do you remember in that neighborhood, were there any, gangs that you encountered or anything like that?
I'm trying to remember, because there were gangs.
Yeah.
And I remember we tried to be like junior gangs.
That's right.
Getting into a fight with, I mean, the whole cliche, throwing rocks, throwing linoleum.
Of course.
Ripping antennas off of cars and banishing them as enemies.
That's right.
And we were on the street level at Hughes Avenue, and there was a cliff. Rocks, which is a building now,
Yeah.
and they would throw stuff at us, and we'd throw stuff at them, but they had the decided advantage being elevated.
That's right.
And I still have a little scar here. I forgot which one of these eyes I got hit with a rock.
Wow.
I still have the. I mean, you know, a little blood. But,
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, we didn't think. Again, it seemed normal.
That's right.
You know, later on when I got older and I was living in Gun Hill, I remember kind of the last of the gangs with the executioners.
Oh, yes. Okay, the executioners for sure.
And we were teenagers at this point, smoking pot in the park.
Yeah.
And being hippies.
Yeah.
So the executioners, we just quaked with fear when they came.
Yeah.
But by that time, their numbers were diminished quite a bit, and they just
Sure.
wanted to do the same thing we were doing. But
Yeah.
we never bonded, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we were terrified of them. But before that, when I was younger, I was too stupid or whatever to know. Like,
Yeah, sure.
gangs, yeah, you know, it's what you do when you're that age.
Yeah, sure.
What else is there to do?
Yeah, that's right. And what about your parents during this period of your life? What did your parents do, you know, either to earn a living or occupy their time or whatever it might be?
My father's probation officer.
Okay.
My mother stayed home until I got older, and then she started working in Alexander's.
I see.
But I just have to state that I always had a very problematical relationship with my parents.
Sure.
It's always been very difficult.
Sure.
They were both alcoholics, and
Sure, absolutely.
I just want to leave it at that. It wasn't pleasant.
Sure, yeah. Now, you mentioned Alexander's. Why don't you talk some about, you know, other stores that you remember from this period of your life? Because I'm sure there's maybe some overlap with the Gun Hill Houses period, but in this period, you know, neighborhood stores or restaurants, bakeries, anything like that that you remember from this period of your life.
I remember the pizza place, 15 cents a slice. I don't remember what it was called. I think it was called Regina's, but I could be wrong about
Okay.
that. It was on Tremont Avenue.
Sure.
And I remember the older kids made the pizzas, and there was they would throw the pizza in the air,
Yeah.
trying to impress people.
Yeah.
And other people would bet them they would drop the dough. There was a candy store. At this time, a lot of candy stores were run by concentration camp survivors.
Sure.
This will reappear. But where I bought my comic books was there, and it was sort of, I'd go in there and drop quite a bit of money, you know, for that time.
Yeah.
And never got a notice of recognition from him at all.
Where was that comic book store?
It's on Tremont and Belmont.
Tremont and Belmont.
Right on the corner. It's a convenience store now.
I wonder, this would be, you know, maybe 2 decades later, but there's someone else who mentioned that candy store, you know, we're talking about in the 80s, who I think would buy comic books there. And he said there was some connection maybe to a venue down in the, you know, maybe the Lower East Side or something like that. I don't know if that's where this comes back in or not. Maybe it's
could be. I don't know anything
anyway.
about it. I didn't know anything. I left that neighborhood when I was 9.
Yeah.
So
You didn't stay connected.
I don't know about that. I remember the Woolworths, of course.
Sure. And did you go to the elementary school in that neighborhood, or did you go to a
PS 92.
PS 92.
In fact, my first public appearance was in 3rd grade, reciting my Arbor Day poem.
Oh.
That's when we celebrated Arbor Day.
Yeah, sure.
On the steps of PS 92.
Wow. Wow.
And that was, I remember getting the bug immediately. Wow, this is great. You know, after I got over the fear.
Yeah, sure.
Wow, everyone's paying attention.
And what were the teachers like that you had at PS 92?
White, Jewish.
Do you remember any of them? Did any of them make an impression on you?
Yes. Well, not so much that they made an impression.
Yeah.
Is that my first grade? This is a funny story. My first grade teacher was named Miss Glory.
Okay.
So years later, I meet this woman who does therapy for kids. We were in therapy ourselves, and she said, "Yeah, you want to come down to school?" I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." So I'm talking to one of the few teachers there who remembered Miss Glory, and we're going on and on and on about, you know, Miss Glory. Like, we're grown-ass adults. Why are we still calling her Miss Glory? Did she have a first name?
Not that you knew.
No, never.
That's funny.
Never.
Wow. Wow. So still there all those years later. Um, and
Well, the other funny thing about that story, if I might,
yeah, sure.
is that obviously by this time the school was all black and Hispanic,
Yeah,
and so I became show and tell. I became, sort of like the white guy who went into school.
yeah,
So this little kid's immaculately dressed. He's beautiful. He's a cute little kid, and they're introducing me to him. And goes, Russell went to the school here. Little kid just looks at me and goes, "Yeah, bullshit."
that's funny. Wow, wow. Um, and the apartment building that you were living in at that point, why don't you talk to some about the building? Was it a 5-floor walk up? Was it another kind of building?
You had 1997 Hughes Avenue, apartment 3D or 3E.
Okay.
It was a 5-story walk up,
Yeah.
but it was kind of weird in that it had this little courtyard, a backyard which we were never allowed in. The Cuban super would always chase us out of there.
Yeah.
And it had like four, I'm trying to remember now, 4 or 5 separate entrances,
Wow.
little entrances. It's something that you imagine would probably look pretty spectacular at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. There's not a whole lot of buildings you see like that in the
No, in
Bronx.
fact, when I go back, because I'm an inveterate urban walker,
Yeah.
and I'll walk back to all my old neighborhoods, I will say going back to Hughes Avenue in the '80s was a little dicey, but
Yeah,
besides
sure.
that, not much problems. And that building is still there.
Wow. Wow. Um, Now, during this period of your life, I know, you were basically born into a stew of doo-wop, but is there other music that's catching your ear at this point in time?
Well, like I said, the pop radio,
Yeah.
Locomotion,
Sure, that's right.
whatever's top 40 was all sounded all good to me.
Sure, sure. Um, and, did any of your friends or family members, were any of them into music?
No, my parents wouldn't totally not. Well, my father had some records.
Sure.
He liked Harry Belafonte, but
I see.
neither of them were big music listeners. And basically, what I knew was upset. I didn't know anyone was obsessive yet. That was later on.
That was later on.
All the music was on the radio.
Sure, sure. And so just a couple more questions before we move to the Gun Hill houses. Were there any parks or other kinds of public areas that you would, play in or hang out in at this point in time?
Yeah, now I'm trying to remember because we always called it Crotona Park, but I don't think it was Crotona Park.
Okay.
On Tremont Avenue.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
So we're like sort of like where the Bronx, I don't know what the civil building is, right around there. But we called it Crotona, but I don't think it was called Crotona.
Yeah. I
And
think
that's where we used to find the glue tubes and broken
right there.
glass. And
I see.
there was a beautiful fountain that didn't work anymore.
I think that was at one point a part of Crotona Park, and then got cut off from with the Cross Bronx Expressway.
Well, yeah, that's how you walk there, and it's obvious that it got cut off. But the
Um,
last time I was there, they put the city put a plaque on it that says something.
Walter
different.
Gladwin Park, I think.
No,
is
it
what
wasn't
it's-
named after a pro. It was like something very generic, like
Tremont Park. Yeah, that was the next most recent name. Yeah, Tremont Park. That's what they called it. But now it's called Gladwin Park, I think. Just as of a year or two ago. But yeah, that's interesting. Now, do you remember? Again, I'm sure you're probably too young, but do you remember any adults or anyone, or do you remember the Cross Bronx Expressway construction being a thing in people's consciousness or something that people spoke about at all?
It was there already. The
Yeah.
expressway was there already.
Yeah.
It was only in retrospect that we got to understand that's one of the reasons why there was so much flight.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it took me, I didn't understand that till years later. But,
Yeah.
why was everybody leaving?
Yeah, sure.
Because we were 3 blocks from the expressway, 4 blocks from the expressway.
That's right.
And it just kind of, I find it really funny now that what they want to do to it.
Yeah.
The changes they want to make. It sounds
Yeah.
like such a pipe dream, but
I know. So is there anything else, any other memories that you want to share about, these first 10 years of your life that you haven't shared yet? Either stories or things that you think are important to emphasize?
didn't mention a big part of my life was the local movie theater, which was the Deluxe.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Sure. Sure.
And every Saturday afternoon, we would go and watch all kinds of crappy movies.
Yeah.
It was, I think, maybe 50 cents. It was even that much. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But they always had these little, kind of like the last days of this, with the little colored advertisement cards. And if you had the right color, you won a prize.
Wow.
So I sort of stood like in the 50s when they gave away dishes.
Yeah.
It was the same kind of thing. I never won.
Wow, that's interesting. And it was still the setup where you just paid one price and you could stay there as long as you
Yeah, nobody
wanted,
bothered.
right?
Nobody bothered you.
Yeah.
There were ushers, which is kind of funny in retrospect.
Yeah, that is funny.
You know, you'd tell you to stop yelling and stop doing this and stop doing that.
Yeah.
I don't remember anybody seeing anybody getting mugged or anything like that there.
Yeah.
Never.
Were there other movie theaters that you'd occasionally go to?
At that time, I was only 9, so not really. I was only in the Gun Hill Projects years.
Yeah, yeah.
Where I mean, I could rattle. I don't know if you want to do this chronologically or.
Yeah, yeah. Why don't you name them now? Then we'll transition to the Gun Hill houses, kind of from
Okay,
here.
well, you know, there was when I moved to. Well, let me put this. There was Laconia, the Wakefield, the Allerton.
Sure.
I should go back to the Bronx for a second. Say the Loews Fairmont was down the street.
Yes.
We go to that occasionally,
Okay.
but not. I don't. For some reason we didn't go too often.
Yeah.
I remember seeing Blow Up with Scott at the Ascot, which was the art theater.
Oh wow.
On the
Okay.
Grand Concourse.
Yeah. Sure.
And of course, there was the Paradise, where I graduated junior high school and high school from.
Absolutely.
Then there was all those others on Fordham, the Valentine,
That's
Lido,
right.
the Lido, was it called?
I think that's right. Yeah.
It was a little one.
Yeah.
You see some weird. I remember seeing, for some reason, I don't know why it sticks in my mind, a movie about Che Rivera there.
Really? Huh. Wow.
I don't know why it wasn't a particularly good movie or anything like that, but it just
Yeah.
sticks
Sure.
in my
Sure.
mind.
Sure. That's yeah.
It was like seeing Blow Up at the Ascot, and me and Scott having a conversation. Well, did we see any nipple? We went to go see the Yardbirds.
That's funny.
But we didn't know about any of this other stuff.
Sure. Sure. Sure.
We're 13.
Yeah, that's right. Wow. So at Gun Hill Houses, why don't you share some about, if you remember some of your earliest impressions, how you adjusted to that move, some of the first friends you made in that neighborhood.
It was pretty seamless. I remember, like I said before, Scott and Richard were one of the first friends I made.
Wow.
I still have people that I talk to on Facebook, like Jeffrey Jacobs. Mark Mergler was another one there that I don't, but he was there. We started hanging out with more people from Parkside Projects and 80 Towers for some reason.
Okay, sure.
So, Robert Zakeel was one of my better friends. Randy Price, who was Richard Price's younger brother, was in my homeroom in high school.
I see. I see.
He was a great swimmer.
Wow. And did you go to Olinville Junior High? Is that
Yes,
the junior
I
high
did.
you went to?
Yeah,
Okay.
I started at PS 41, which leads the Bronx in education.
Sure.
I finished 6th grade there, went to Olinville, then I went to Evander. Heartbroken that I had to make the Bronx High School of Science because seemingly everyone else I knew did.
Yeah.
But it was Olinville was rough.
Yeah.
That was my roughest years.
I see.
Because we were in what used to be called the SPs
Sure.
at that time, and you would just get molested and smacked in the back of the head or had your shirt pulled off.
I see.
To the cry of SP faggot.
I see. Yep.
So it was, plus puberty's going on at this time too. So it wasn't, plus I'm being bar mitzvahed, which,
All kinds
there's
of.
all kinds of weird changes that were going. They weren't all good.
Yeah. And did Scott and Richard, were they also at Olinville with you?
Yes.
Okay. Were they in the SP classes with you?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So you had a
We were in a
little bit of a group there.
Yeah. I remember Richard getting suspended for throwing his book up in the air when he found out it was a Jewish holiday. He wouldn't have to go to school.
Wow. Now, talk some about, obviously there's your friends at Gun Hill houses, but what kinds of people, what was the community like at Gun Hill houses, when you moved in there and during the 10 years you lived there?
Uh, Once the parents, it wasn't as close knit
Okay.
as Hughes Avenue was.
Yeah,
It was there, but there was less of it than there used to be.
sure.
Um, Gun Hill, my time there was very mixed.
Yeah,
All kinds of people,
yeah, sure.
and everyone more or less, as much as getting as much as you are going to get along, got along. Now there was what we used to call Magenta Park, which is actually Gun Hill Playground,
Yeah, sure.
which is where the druggy stuff went on. That's when we started sniffing glue, and
I see.
taking Quaaludes, and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
I drank, some of us drank. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't as homogeneous as Hughes Avenue was. It wasn't as close knit, and Hughes Avenue wasn't particularly close knit, but this
Sure.
was even less. And then the neighborhood started getting very Caribbean,
I see. I see.
and things started changing. Project qualifications started to get lowered, and that all started to change.
Sure.
So my parents fled to Hartsdale.
I see.
I went with them for about a year, couldn't stand it anymore, and took the apartment in Tryon.
I see. I see. I see. So that's how you ended up on Tryon. I see. I see. Now, um, during your junior high years, were you becoming obsessed with music at this point, or was it not until later?
No, that's when I really started. When I really started getting obsessed with music. I can name you all the record stores from that era.
Yes, please do. Please do.
There was one on. There was the Evander Music Shop,
Okay.
right? I think more like 211th Street or something like that. Where we used to go in on the pretense that a Beatles single, which was never released in this country, called "I'll Be Back." We used to go in and ask for that every week, and take the surveys, which were free anyway.
Yeah, sure.
No major crime. There was a record place, I don't remember the name of it. It was close to Brad's, the Jamaican record store, but it was on the other side of White Plains Road, where we used to buy a lot of singles. And there's a book called Becoming the Beach Boys, with the guy Murphy who wrote it. Talks about going there when he was a kid.
Okay. Huh.
And then there was a couple more going further north.
Yeah.
But the real mother lode for us was to go to Fordham Road.
Sure.
And for us and our crowd, we took the spinning disc on the concourse. That was the shit.
Absolutely.
That was I mean, they were all good, but that was they seemed to be like the hip ones.
Yeah.
Like the more alternative culture people were working there.
I see. I see.
If I get Pat the Junkie.
Yeah.
We don't know if he was a junkie, but he looked like one, I guess, so we called him, or whatever we thought
sure.
a junkie was.
Sure.
We called him Pat the Junkie. But, there's the legendary Cousins, there was Music Makers, where my friend Guy worked. There was, the record bin in Alexander's was excellent.
I've heard that before, yeah.
Really good sales, good deep sales. And if your family had a car, you'd go up to Sam Goody's in Cross County.
Sure.
Because they had pretty deep sales as well.
Wow.
And they were bigger probably than any of these other record stores.
Yeah. Now, do you remember the first record that you purchased on your own?
Yes, I bought 2 singles.
Okay.
She Loves You by the Beatles and Do You Love Me by the Dave Clark Five.
Wow.
First album was Glad All Over by the Dave Clark Five.
Okay. Wow. And how old were you in both those cases?
10 and maybe 10 when I bought the album too.
Okay. Okay. Wow. So.
I remember buying the Stones album very early on at all places, Honig's Parkway on Webster Avenue.
Oh, really? Wow.
I bought that probably was much more than 11 when I bought that.
Wow. Wow.
And then there was the Beatles, of course. The Beatles,
course.
they were the pinnacle. It was, the world kind of spun in those years around the new issue of Fantastic Four and Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And a Beatles single.
Yeah, that's right.
That was pretty much the whole world at that point.
Sure. Sure. And, after you moved to Gun Hill, what comic book store did you go to, or which ones would you go to?
Another good one. Evander Sweet Shop, or we used to call it Cappy's.
Okay.
Cappy was a partner. Morris was the other cat. Morris was the the other partner who didn't get any credit.
Yeah, yeah.
But they were kind of a luncheonette comic book store. And
Okay.
I used to go get cigarettes for my mother there. Used to go in whatever the day, I forgot what day now, that new comic books would come out and just pile them up. And
Wow.
there was a little luncheonette that had really lousy food, but we really loved it for some reason.
Yeah, sure.
That place is Cappy was a pretty cool guy. I can't remember how, but I just always liked Cappy. Morris was a little more standoffish.
I see.
But of all the candy stores in that time in that neighborhood, that's the one that sticks out. That was a pinnacle to me.
Wow.
That was the holy grail.
Sure.
And it was right across the street because we lived in the building right in the corner of Gun Hill and White Plains. So it was just, all I had to do was cross Gun Hill Road.
Wow. Now, do you remember what the first live music you experienced was?
Yeah. Well, we were members of Shore Haven Beach Club for a couple of years.
Okay.
And it'd be a live band, but no, it was kind of like local bands.
Yeah, sure.
The first real concert I went with Scott, and it was at Jefferson Airplane in October of 1967.
Wow.
At Hunter College.
Okay.
And then the second concert I went to was the Doors at Hunter College. A few months after that, we sat in the fifth row, and I'm 14, and I'm looking at Jim Morrison. I've never seen anything like this before.
Wow.
I've had several life-changing moments in music, but that might have been the first one.
Yeah, sure. I bet so.
Seeing Jim Morrison.
That's incredible.
And the funny thing was that he did the show, he did not move a muscle. He just was like translucent white, all black leather.
Wow.
And I'm 14, so I've never seen this before.
Yeah. Wow.
Hair perfect, just totally nonchalant.
Wow. And, given the bands you were seeing and the time and your age, I imagine, were you already kind of getting into like counterculture at this point in time, or were you just on the edges of it?
Yeah, when I talk about my syncretion of radio and ABC and Hughes Avenue, to MCA later on because they had a bigger playlist.
Yeah.
And then there was a short-lived station called WOR-FM.
Okay.
Remember the K went back to but they played totally freeform.
Okay.
This whole talk about freeform, there were really only two real freeform commercial stations that I can remember.
Yeah.
One was WOR, and then a little later on, PLJ, when they were trying to find their way, went totally freeform for a very brief time.
Yeah.
So there was a guy named Michael Cascuna who was a famous jazz person, but he had a show and he played all blues.
Okay, sure.
So while this is going on, we're starting to go to concerts. We're going to the Fillmore semi-regularly as much as we can.
Sure.
And another thing which I to this day still pine about.
Yeah, I know.
Is a Fillmore. It's hard to describe to somebody who's never there why it was special. Maybe it's just because I was young, but it was. The sound was good. You got three bands. I know Bill Graham got a bad rap, but he did a great job.
Yeah.
Bringing this stuff to New York.
Now, do you remember what the your first experience at the Fillmore was? Which bands were on the lineup?
Well, this is a perfect example of it. Country Joe and the Fish.
Okay.
10 Years After.
Okay.
And Procol Harum.
Wow.
And we had the cheap seats. I think it was $3.
Wow. Yeah.
The best one I saw at the Fillmore was Chuck Berry, Albert King, and The Who.
Oh my God. What a lineup.
That was the best one. Or maybe that's first. Second would be Bonzo Dog Band, The Kinks, and Spirit.
Okay, I see.
I like that one a lot.
Yeah.
Also, but we live for that.
Now, were there other kids from either the Gun Hill houses or your junior high school who were into this, or were you like just a small group of?
We were a small group. I mean, from say Evander, there was nobody in. There was one person I go to the Fillmore with, who actually lived in one of these brownstones.
Oh, really?
Larry Engel.
Okay.
Yeah, we were tight around high school.
Yeah.
He went to Woodstock.
I see.
We used to go see shows, but it was a small smattering.
Yeah.
It was more kids from Bronx Science
Yeah.
that would go, that would be part of the crew that went down.
Sure.
Basically, it was just me and Richard that would go down from Evander, that would go down to the Fillmore.
I see. I see. I see.
In fact, we were kind of, we're trying to grow our hair long, and we were freaks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Remember what, 1968? I won some writing award in junior high school for, I remember the topic, I don't remember what I wrote. Why New York is an important shipping city. And I won third place. It was like a $15 reward or something like that. And my hair was fairly long at that time. And the presentation was at City Hall, and I had to be accompanied by a parent. And my father would not go down with me until I cut my hair.
Wow. Did you cut your hair?
Yeah.
Oh, you did. Yeah. Wow. And were you like adopting some of the rest of the countercultural dress at the time, or just the hair?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, well, although I have to say, I never owned a pair of bell bottoms.
Okay. All right.
Polka dot shirts.
Sure. Sure.
And boots.
Yeah.
I was crazy about both of those. So yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much of the trends at the time.
Sure. Now, aside from Bronx High School of Science, were there places in the Bronx and record stores, I'm sure, were there places in the Bronx that you might go to hang out to meet other people who were, into the same kind of thing?
Sort of. There was a very short-lived club. We were too young.
Yeah.
On 241st Street.
Oh, okay.
I forgot what it was called, but it was there for a few months.
Huh.
And they did pretty top-name acts. Frank Zappa and people like, they did a lot of pretty top.
Wow.
But we were too young. We couldn't get in.
Wow.
Because even then the drinking age was 18.
Sure.
But for like-minded people, there was basically Parkside Projects with my friends there.
Yeah.
And then a little later on, there was Lighting again. I probably got the name of it wrong, but Lighting Park, right on right by the zoo entrance there.
Sure.
I forgot what the street's called. It's Bronx River East or whatever.
Yeah.
And that would be people who talk about music and take Quaaludes and try and have sex and all that kind of typical teenage things.
Sure.
But that was really about it. Wasn't until way later on.
Yes.
In fact, one of the big things in my development, in my life, was how important CBGB's was to me, because it was just another world for me. It got to unloosen so much of my insecurities.
Yeah.
It really made me it's hard to describe again, because it was a bar.
Yeah.
It was a crappy bar, a stinky bar.
Yeah. But
it was heaven.
Yeah.
And that was when I really started connecting with music people.
I see. Wow. And just for the sense of timeline here, what's the first time you started going down to CBGB's?
74.
74. Okay, I see.
Patti Smith and television.
I see. Okay, wow. So we're still in the, 67, 68, 69, period going into the early 70s, and there's nothing like that for you.
No. We were, one of the funny things now, as old as Bronx nostalgia, and I'm guilty of it, as anyone, but when we were teenagers, especially when we had to be later teenagers, we couldn't just wait to get the fuck out.
Yep.
And at that time, it was like Saturday Night Fever. So
Yeah.
to go to Manhattan.
That's right. Now,
anyone tells you different is full of shit.
Absolutely.
It was too provincial.
Yeah.
At that time.
Yeah. Nothing to do except hang out.
There literally there's nothing to do but to hang around and get high.
Yep. Now, were you the types of teenagers who would, aside from going to the venues in Manhattan, would you say hang out at, Washington Square Park, or hang out at any of the?
Not that much, and I kind of regret it in a way. But nothing major.
Okay, I see.
No.
Now, when you finished at Olinville and you went to Evander, talk some about what your time at Evander was like.
Such a fog.
Yeah, yeah,
It was. I really don't remember that much about it. It was just kind of like searching. There was a lot of searching. I graduated okay, but
yeah,
it was rough.
yeah,
It was rough. It was like no sense. There was no identity there.
yeah.
I don't remember hating those years. The junior high school years were terrifying.
Sure,
The
sure.
high school years were just kind of like there.
Yeah,
And I sometimes look back and I have very few memories in those 3 years.
I see. I see. Were you going to, hang out with some of the students at Bronx High School of Science at that point in time?
That was my home away from home. Every time when I worked out my last senior semester, where I had a periods 1 to 5 scheduled, and period 5 was lunch.
Uh-huh.
So I was done at 11:30 in the morning.
Wow.
So I used to go hang out at Bronx High School of Science.
Wow.
And I would do that every day. And
Yeah.
there were a lot of people that I still talk to.
Sure. Sure. Did you know anyone at DeWitt Clinton? Was there ever any, I guess, mixing of crowds with DeWitt Clinton?
Not pleasant.
Not pleasant. I see.
Science kids were again now you were from SP faggot to science faggot.
I see. Uh-huh.
We were moving up.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but still
But I wasn't a
beat
science
up
faggot, but I was white.
Yeah.
Yeah, which qualified me.
I see.
No, I mean I know a couple of people who went to Bronx High School. I went to DeWitt Clinton, but not very many.
Sure.
And you kind of try to avoid it.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, were you aware at this point in time, or did you listen very much to the Blues Magoos? Did you know they were from the Bronx?
Oh yeah, Pepe Castro.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that much about them, but
Sure.
In fact, we lived in the projects. There was a kid next door who started a band, and I used to go in and listen to them play every once in a while, and their big song was "We Ain't Got Nothing Yet."
I see.
I loved playing that one. But no, I never got to meet them or anything like that.
Sure. Now, at this point in your life, had you ever, or were you ever considering, being a part of a band or performing, anything like that?
Not really. I had delusions of it, but it wasn't anything past that because I'm a lousy guitar player.
Yeah.
I'm pretty much a lousy singer too, but that's easier to do.
Yeah, sure.
But no, I just kind of want to be. It wasn't until later. It wasn't until I got to CBGB's that I had enough confidence and enough bravado and enough alcohol to say I can do this.
I see. Now, what about were you involved at all in any kind of like, say, student activism? Not that it always went hand in hand with the counterculture movement, but
Well, we protested the Vietnam War.
Sure.
I remember being a part of a huge march where all the high schools in the Bronx joined together.
Sure.
And marched, and we'd go from one high school to another high school, tell everyone to come out, and they'd come out, and we'd become a bigger march and a bigger march and a bigger march. I was very anti-war, but I didn't do a hell of a lot about it outside of that.
Sure. And why don't you talk some more about, other memorable venues or shows during this period of your life? I mean, late 60s into early 70s. I mean, some of the best music is being produced.
It was the time that me and Larry Engel went to go see Canned Heat at Westchester County Center.
Okay.
And the funny thing about that story is, we didn't know that the Westchester buses stopped running at a certain point. So we decided halfway back, we're going to stop off at Nathan's. And we're sitting a half hour, I don't think there's any more buses coming. So we hitched, and again, an attractive young lady picked us up. I tell you, these were different times. I mean, nothing happened, but,
Sure.
And we got a ride back to the Bronx.
Wow. And was there anything, I mean, I know you mentioned that one venue on 241st maybe. But was there anything in the way of live music that you remember going to in the Bronx at this point in time during these years?
No, it wasn't till a little later on.
Okay.
But there was, I do have to say this now. There was a club called Angano's
Okay.
on 70th Street and Broadway.
Okay.
And it was the first time that I saw Iggy and the Stooges.
Really? Okay.
And we were 16, and remember the drinking age was 18. So we decided we're gonna try and make ourselves look older, but we're gonna get online at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We were standing there worried, nervous about, I wonder if we're gonna get in. Turns out Angano's had lost their liquor license.
Yeah, so it wasn't an
So
issue.
it was kind of moved. But that was another one of those, seeing Iggy Pop for the first time was one of those life-changing experiences for me.
I bet. Yeah, what was he like on stage that night?
Maniacal, extremely coked up.
Yeah.
But just, you couldn't take your eyes off him. And the band was just so loud and pulsing and played genuine good rock and roll.
Absolutely.
I mean, those first two albums especially, you can't beat those still.
I know. Incredible, the energy, just...
And the live show was out of this world. I mean, of course, with the good you get the bad with somebody who's that obsessive.
Yeah.
So there were, we saw them a million times that time. Later on, some of them weren't so good.
Yeah, that's right.
I remember taking the LIRR and out to my father's place in a bitter January cold to go see them play. That just when the thing was breaking up. They did 3 songs. He fell off the stage. They took him to the hospital. That was that.
Wow. Now, before we get to, your CBGB's years and spend some time unpacking all of that, are there any other kind of life-changing moments musically that you had that you haven't mentioned yet up to that point in time?
There were certain albums, singles that did.
Okay.
The Birds, Mr. Tambourine Man really changed my life,
Sure.
my musical taste. Love and Spoonful, they were the shit to me. They were my favorite band.
Yeah.
Do You Believe in Magic album. I still listen to it all the time. Great album.
Yes.
Just mind changing. Those are by far the biggest.
Sure. Now before
Frank Zappa and the Mothers were big.
Frank Zappa, yeah.
The first bunch of albums.
God, I had no idea that they that he played in the Bronx. I'm gonna have to do some research and look into that.
Yeah, I can't. The club is called like Head East or something East.
Okay.
I think.
Okay, I see.
And it was only around for a few months. It was 241st in White Plains.
Okay. Wow.
Because it was close enough to us that we could go, but we couldn't get in.
Couldn't get in. Wow. That would have been incredible. Wow. Now, before you went to CBGB's, did you go to Max's?
Yeah.
Yeah? What was Max's like?
They had a lot of different kinds of music.
Yeah.
It was more eclectic. It wasn't before punk.
That's right.
So I saw some great acts. I saw Doug Salm there.
Sure.
I saw Loudon Wayne right there.
Yeah.
He said some really good stuff. And me and my first girlfriend used to go and sit down. I used to work at the post office at that time.
Okay.
And so I worked these bizarre midnight shifts. So I had these bizarre days off like Monday and Tuesday.
Yeah.
So Monday and Tuesday, okay, this is cool. It won't be weekend people. We go down to Max's, have dinner, have some drinks, and look at Alice Cooper and Todd Rundgren. And we did that pretty much weekly for a while, throw chickpeas around.
Wow. So was that your entry point into CBGB's? Is that how you heard about CBGB's? How'd you get in the CBGB's
mix?
mix?
And the Village Voice.
Okay.
Heard about Patti Smith.
Yeah.
And the vibe was that you got to see this with this woman, Patti Smith, and just playing at this new bar.
Yeah.
CBGB's. So we went down. We saw television, which was fantastic, and she was great. And it took a little while to really get to become a regular there.
Yeah.
But not that long, because I worked at the Bottom Line on West 4th and Mercer.
Oh, okay.
For many years. This is really advancing the story.
Okay, sure.
So I would be there 7 nights. So I'd work and then go there because they stayed open later.
Yeah, I see.
7 nights a week. I mean, literally 7 nights a week,
Yeah.
almost 365 days.
Wow. Wow. Now, as you're in like the early 70s period, early to mid 70s in New York City, why don't you talk some about, I guess, first of all, what the Bronx was like at that time that you remember, and then what, the wider city was like in these years?
Different. Like I said, we looked at the Bronx through tinted eyes. We wanted to get out, so you'd see how the Bronx, already in the early 70s, the Bronx is going to shit. The Bronx is going to shit.
Yeah.
And it was, it become more dangerous. It become more dangerous.
Sure.
There were drugs and there was booze and but we were so hypocritical because we were doing all that. We
of course.
Bugging anyone, but we were doing drugs. We were hanging out in the park, scaring the crap out of old people.
Yeah.
But I just remember liking it less and less.
Sure.
And the city, I mean, it's a neighborhood by neighborhood thing.
That's right.
East Village, I can go on to you about the East Village for hours.
Yeah.
Because that's my real spiritual home.
Sure.
And to see what that's like now, it makes me almost want to cry. I go down there, I don't know where I am.
I know. Now, did it become your spiritual home, primarily through CBGB?
More or less. I wanted to move to Manhattan, and the manager at the Bottom Line in 1976 got me an apartment on Mott and Houston.
Okay, I see.
$175 a month rent.
Wow. Wow.
on the ground floor.
Wow.
On the ground floor. So from there it became that. Then there was no turning back.
No turning back at that point.
Yeah, that was,
I see.
I was like a big inch. I remember my parents coming down to visit me and go, your grandfather would be turning over in his grave if he saw this.
Wow. So, but before you did that, you lived with Ross in the neighborhood,
Tryon
right?
Avenue, yeah.
And how did you meet Ross? Did you meet Ross through Scott?
Scott, yeah.
I see. And
but he was, there were a group of people, the kind of Bronx people that were hanging out. That was sort of like what you were talking about before, but we weren't that close knit.
Sure.
Eric Weinstein, for instance, who is, the HBO show Entourage.
Yeah.
He's the real E.
I see.
Eric grew up in Riverdale.
Yeah.
And right now he's working with, what's his name? The guy who made Boogie Nights, made a lot of really other crappy movies.
Oh, yeah. I what's that guy?
He works with him, and he's financially doing very well. He just got married, had a kid. But he was part of the crew.
I see.
And there was a character called Lope, which I assume the girls might have mentioned to you at some point.
I don't think so, no.
He lived on the west side. He lived more like in Riverdale. And
okay.
He was just one of these... He was just sort of like a Jim Ignatoski from Taxi type.
Okay.
But he was a lot funnier. And sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally.
Yeah.
And on top of that, he drove a cab.
Okay. That's funny.
But he was a piece of work. He was just so funny.
Wow.
Kind of like this stone sort of, but like loud reverie. And, I remember the last time I saw him, he came into Manitoba's bar. I was sitting there with my wife, who's a person who's not my wife now.
Yeah.
And he came in and he was on fire. All his greatest hits. And I turned around to my wife after he left because he was driving. He just took a break. He just looked at I looked at her and said, "You're never going to see anything like that again."
Wow. And were Tish and Snooki in the fold yet at this point, or not till
No,
later?
but there's a kind of funny story about after we met each other. We met at CBGB's.
Okay.
And after we met, it came to be that Snooki had a car, and she would come. They would drive around Lilac Park, which I told you about before, and moon us. That was you.
They also mentioned that they love to do crank calls.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're ever on the receiving end of.
Not that I can remember.
Yeah, sure,
I'm sure I have, but
sure.
I think they did that to people they didn't like.
Yeah, I think you're right. Now, had you seen, or before you moved in with Russ, had you seen the Dictators play yet?
No, because they hadn't played
Oh,
yet.
okay. Oh, yeah, because I guess that would be, you moved in with him, that would be what, 73?
70.
74 maybe at the
No, it was
latest?
a little later, but it was shortly before they started to play.
Shorter before they
But
started
the
to
thing
play,
about
okay.
them is, I don't know if you talked to Russ about this, but they recorded an album before they did a
Yep.
live gig. Before they did a live gig.
Yep. That's right.
So yeah, I mean, the first time I ever seen them play was at a bar called Coventry in Queens,
Oh, sure.
which is infamous for starting Kiss,
Absolutely.
and actually Joey Ramone's old band used to play there as well.
Sure.
And yes, I saw them there, and Richard started as the guest secret weapon, and worked his way up to what he is now.
Yeah, that's right.
But no, they didn't play a lot.
Yeah.
But then they started to play
That's right.
after the Manitoba incident at CBGB's Wayne County.
That's right.
They were
That's
banned
right.
from CBGB's for a while.
Yeah.
So they just all they needed is one less place to be able to play.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, you know, when all of these bands were coming out at the time, obviously, you know, we can retroactively call them punk now, but it wasn't what it was, you know, at the time, just rock and roll. What are some of the
I
other?
like to look at it that way because that's
Yeah.
that's what it is.
Yeah. What are some of the other bands that you remember? The new fresh bands that were coming up in New York in the 70s that you remember seeing?
Well, the biggest one were the New York Dolls.
Of course.
The New York Dolls just changed it. Another life changing moment for me. I saw them when the Stones did their 1972 tour. Played Madison Square Garden. They did a matinee. I went to the matinee, and they were great. But they were the Stones, and
Yeah.
they were already 8 years down the road.
That's right.
And then that night, because we were 18 by this point, so now we can go in these places. Read an interview magazine, Andy Warhol's magazine.
Yeah.
A story about how this band is everything the Rolling Stones wish they could be. So, okay, we're curious. We got to see this. And I'm watching them play, and the songs are great. They're sloppy as crap.
Yep.
And I looked at Johnny Thunders, and I go, I hate that motherfucker, but he's a rock and roll star.
Yeah.
First impression.
Where was that you saw them
Max's.
the first time? Okay, that was at Max's.
Then
Yeah.
we religiously go to Mercer Arts Center
I see.
because they would do 2-3 times a week, and one of those was a free night.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was really kind of, and the band, like I never cared for the bands around them, like
Sure.
you know, Wayne County. I didn't care for them very much, but the Dolls were special.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Again, that raw energy
Exactly.
is there.
And again, like any classic great rock and roller, they shot themselves in the foot.
Yep. Absolutely. A flash in the pan is all they were. I mean, so much more than that. But year-wise,
so influential.
Yeah.
Though.
Yeah, that's
You
right.
know, every year we go through this. Why aren't they in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Yep. I know.
I mean, because Velvet Underground took a long time to get in.
That's right. Did you see them
No.
at all?
I've seen Lou Reed, and we did a record with John Cale,
Yeah, I see.
but I never saw the Velvets.
Now, you mentioned Kiss in passing in connection with the Coventry. Did you see Kiss during these years at all? And what were your impressions of them, if you saw them?
Ace Frehley used to hang out. I went to Lehman College
Sure.
after Evander,
Yeah.
and Ace Frehley used to hang out in the cafeteria, and he was an alcoholic.
Yeah.
And at this time, my drink of choice in these years was Southern Comfort and Coke.
Okay, I see. Sure.
So, Ace or Paul, would come up to you and go, beer breath, stinking middle of the afternoon. Ask me if I like beer, Curly. All right, Paul, you like beer? Is the beer shit in the woods? And then he would just get such a kick out of himself.
Oh my God.
Years later, he came to a Sick Fuck show.
Yeah.
And I was talking to him about that, and he didn't want to acknowledge it at all.
Sure,
Like
sure.
those days ever existed.
Sure.
All he would say to me is, "Did you hear New York Groove?"
Wow. And What are
That's somebody you should do is Ace Frehley. I have great Ace Frehley stories hopping around.
Oh, absolutely. I know. Yeah. Yeah, and he's someone who definitely acknowledges his Bronx roots on a pretty regular basis.
Marion Avenue.
Yep. Yep. And in fact, in our collection, this will be part of the exhibit. We have, a copy of the DeWitt Clinton literary journal that he did the cover design for, and it says Paul Fraley down at the bottom.
Really?
1968. I think it might be it's either before or just right at the beginning of when he was getting into music. He was more on the graphic design kind of.
He allegedly joined through the logo.
Yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, definitely a Bronx person worth doing this around for sure. Now, why don't you talk some more about, obviously the Dolls you mentioned, Patti Smith, Television. What are some of the other bands or musicians that stood out to you at this point in time that were, in the downtown scene?
Stretch it for years. Of course, it was the Ramones, the Talking Heads.
Of course.
Talking Heads might have been the best band down there.
Okay, sure.
And especially when they were a trio. For some reason, I liked them a little less as they added members.
I see.
So if you watch the movie, you kind of, it was nice when it started.
Yeah.
And it was always great. They were always great. They never were less than great.
Sure.
But I liked them as a simple little funk thing.
Yeah.
Little rhythm thing,
Yeah.
Television was really good.
Absolutely.
They shot themselves in the foot.
Yep.
Then there's the Ramones, of course.
Sure.
Blondie, I have to say that the running gag was Blondie.
Yeah.
No one thought this was going to happen. This was kind of out of left field.
Yeah. Sure.
She was a clumsy woman with a mediocre voice, and the band was pretty awful except for the drummer.
Yeah.
One band I really liked were the Cramps.
Oh, okay, sure.
Very underrated band.
Sure,
We
absolutely.
played with them a couple of times. They were great.
Yeah.
And Dead Boys.
Dead Boys, yes.
I'm kind of ashamed, not ashamed, but in those years I was so punk oriented, so club band oriented. I really wasn't listening to a lot of other stuff.
Okay, sure.
And Alice Cooper would be about the most mainstream I would get.
I see.
In those days, and I had to admit I was a little bit of a music snob about all this stuff.
I see.
And I kind of neglected a lot of stuff that I listen to now.
Yeah.
One of the beauties about streaming, and people complain about streaming, and they have damn good reasons, especially if you're a musician.
Yeah.
But you can hear anything.
That's true.
You can hear anything.
Absolutely.
And I'm trying to take advantage of it in my retirement.
Absolutely. So you weren't going to like the stadium rock concerts that were going on during these years or anything like that, huh?
I've been to my fair share of shows at the Garden.
Okay.
Funny you mentioned stadium. I think the only one I ever saw in a stadium.
Yeah.
Was I took my mother to see Simon and Garfunkel.
Okay. I see.
But yeah, arena show. I've done a lot of arena. I've seen Kiss a million times.
Sure.
Other bands, Jay Giles' band, who were like a pre-punk real favorite. That was a real favorite before punk rock.
Yeah. I see. Now,
Peter Wolf's another Bronx guy.
of course. Now, as you're getting more into the later 70s here. I know, the Sick Fucks obviously come about.
77.
But like right around the same period of time, are you hearing about or meeting any of the UK bands that are kind of within the same musical universe?
Yeah. Met the usual suspects.
Suspects.
I met Rotten a couple of times and was very underwhelmed.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Because, he's playing a game. You just want, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
There were some nice. Usually the drummers were nice.
Okay, I see.
drank with Squeeze's drummer a lot.
Okay.
I had a great drinking session once with Elvis Costello's drummer.
Okay.
They were
Sure.
usually the friendly ones in the band,
That's funny.
or the biggest drunks, maybe.
Maybe the biggest drums. That's funny. Wow.
Yeah, I found that after a while to be really a recurring trend. There's always
Yeah.
a drummer I hung out with.
That's
I was hanging
interesting.
out with.
It's interesting. Now, talk some about, how the Sick Fucks came about.
Sick Fucks came about because I wanted to do a one-off, because I wanted to see what it was like to do it.
Okay.
And I put a band together, your standard 2 guitars, bass, and drums.
Yeah.
And I'm telling Tish and Snooky about this before that happens. And Tish, without missing a beat, just goes, "Well, when do we start?" And there's a little light bulb went off in my head. I said, "Yeah, no matter how bad this is, because they've been doing it for a few years already.
That's
they
right.
were good, and they had personality, and everybody loved them. So we did it. We did it like 3 weeks after Manic Panic first opened. It was right around this kind of a busy time of year.
Yes.
Since 77, they started open in July 77. Our gig was August 1st.
Wow.
And so we do the first gig. We pack the place because we're bragging to everyone.
Yeah.
And people are drinking like fish. So we're getting another gig. As long as we make it to the stage, we're getting another gig.
Yeah, yeah.
So we couldn't give it up. The thing I'll never forget about the first time was after we finished playing, I'm off the stage. I'm like, I've got this flush of energy. It's a burst. It's like kind of like losing your virginity almost.
Yeah.
In a way. Alex Chilton grabs me by the shoulders. And he goes, "Okay, what are you going to do now?" And I thought, wow, that's really fucked up. But then I started thinking about it. It's just like, Alex kind of peaked when he was 15.
Yeah.
The box tops.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Now, do you remember what songs you played that first gig?
Yeah, we used to do a really filthy song about Tony Tennille.
Okay.
We used to do the very generic "I'm Gonna Rock."
Okay. Yeah,
The one
sure.
with "I'm Not Dull."
Uh-huh.
"I'm Sicker Than You Are." And we covered "Hound Dog." We did the Elvis Presley.
Okay.
The Elvis Presley arrangement.
I see. Wow.
It was pretty short.
Wow. And was there is there a story behind the name, or you just gravitated towards a name that thought might make a statement?
Well, no. First of all, I offered the name to Lester Bangs when he was performing.
Okay.
And he'd said, I thought about that, but no. The spelling of it is very intentional because Sick is leave it as is.
Yeah.
SIC. And in the 70s, the asterisk and fuck there was a popular T-shirt they sold on National Lampoon. Fuck, F asterisk DCK, the only thing missing is you.
Yeah.
So that's where that came from.
I see.
But there was, I didn't even think about the fact it was going to cause me problems because I think it was going to last.
Of course.
I didn't think it was going to
thing.
keep on good. I thought, okay, this is great. And we kept on doing it. And Hilly would always say to us, "Why don't you change the name of the band?" And I go, "Oh, we've gone this far already.
Yeah.
We kind of be like selling out, changing. We're kind of stuck with this now."
That's right.
No one was doing this to make $1 million, obviously.
Sure. Now, were you the main one writing the lyrics for the songs?
Yeah. The original guitar players wrote the music.
I see.
And then later on, it's usually the guitar players who wrote the music.
I see.
And I wrote the lyrics.
I see. And did you have any particular kind of process for writing the lyrics?
Drink beer and write lyrics.
That works.
Remember 1977, the day the World Series and Reggie Jackson hit 3 home runs.
Yeah.
We were sitting in Norman Schoenfeld and Joey Shadler's house, drinking beer and writing all these songs that would be kind of almost second generation.
Yeah, sure.
Like Teenage Abortion and Rock or Die or Bridges of Forkhead, all these songs. We were just drinking beer, watching the game, writing this, It's my philosophy as far as the band went was there was a nariest song that cannot be improved with the expression, "Fuck you, let's rock." It can't hurt.
That's right. Now, how did you meet, aside from Tish and Snooky, how did you meet everyone else in the Sick Fucks?
Norman was he didn't live there for a short time. He's from St. Louis. Norman and Joey from St. Louis.
Okay.
Norman came to New York to get a record deal. He did real pop sort of ABBA sort of stuff. That was his shtick.
Okay.
And he lived with me and Russ for a brief period of time.
Oh, I see.
He had a connection with Sandy Croman and Murray Krugman, one or the other.
Yeah.
And Joey was his friend and writing partner. You mind if I takes it?
Oh no, go ahead.
And Joey was his. Then they knew Jim Maresca, who was the bass player. And we found this kid, Greg Wassel. The first drummer was the stage manager at the Bottom Line, Ron Lorman. He's actually a lot more interesting. He only did the audition with us. Ron Lorman was road manager. He was road manager for Frank Zappa for a while and Miles Davis for a while. And his partner, his business partner, was Larry Hartke, who went on to develop Hartke bass amps.
Oh, okay. Sure.
I haven't seen him in years. I would love to find out what happened to him. But he was the first one, but he didn't only want to do it once. So we found some kid from Jersey to do it for a little while.
I see.
Who just didn't fit in at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then we broke up and we refigurated it. And then kind of the second wave of the band started. And that stayed pretty good with Jason and Andy. That stayed pretty solid. Harry for a long time.
Sure.
That was solid for a long time.
I see. Like into the 80s.
Actually, Jason
right?
was third, the triumvirate from Norman and Joey, the St. Louis crowd.
Oh, okay. I see.
They all knew each other in St. Louis.
I see. Wow. Now, aside from CBGB's, what other places do you remember playing with the Sick Fucks during this period?
This period, not too many, because there weren't too many places to play.
Sure.
And in those days, you were either CBGB's band or Max's band. Very few played both.
I see.
So occasionally we played some bizarre joint in Jersey.
Yeah, I see.
And we went down to Philadelphia. We did go down to Philadelphia. Regulars in Philadelphia.
Okay, sure.
A place called the Hot Club.
Okay.
On South and 20th, when it was a lousy neighborhood.
I see.
Went back there because my cousin lives there now. And the neighbor's completely gentrified.
Wow.
It's another, it's like looking at Peace Village.
Wow. Did you all have any, very close relationships or connections with any of the Philly bands?
No.
Or around there? No,
not really.
I think
at that point there weren't too many yet.
Yeah, sure.
There weren't very many. It was later on that it really got. I remember Ben Vaughn used to come and watch us play a lot.
Okay, I see. Now, I think I remember Tish and Snooki saying that maybe there was a one-off show on the Upper East Side at some bar that they recall with this. I think it was with the Sick Fucks. Maybe it was with Blondie. I'd have to go back and listen. But yeah, I don't think they were. Oh, it was with Blondie, because I think the Ramones also had a show there, and they, they played a couple songs and were never invited back.
No, we used to play a place on the west side in 72nd Street called Tracks.
Oh, okay.
Which was fun because it was a place where, again, I re-met Ace Frehley.
Okay, sure.
And John Belushi, who was a fan of the band.
I see.
Was waiting for us in the dressing room when we showed up for sound check.
Yeah.
And every 10 minutes he'd get up and come back, liar. He introduced the band.
Wow.
And I was standing right behind him, and I'm telling you, you got to imagine the look on people's faces when the spotlight comes on somebody really famous. Because this is around 1980.
Yes.
And he's doing Neighbors. He's already a big star.
Absolutely.
And to turn the spotlight on you, people just this look of horror.
Wow.
So he introduces us. We do the show. He's doing more blow. Grabs me, throws me against the wall. I think he was trying to tell me to get my hair cut.
Wow.
I don't remember now, but he was so out of it. I loved him though. He was great.
Wow.
And of course we used to ask him, "Can you get us on SNL?" And
sure.
He'd go, "Yeah." And then he went to LA and got Fear.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Wow.
It's showbiz.
I know. Now, why don't you describe? I mean, there's videos so people can obviously watch, but describe kind of your stage presence with the Sick Fucks. What your main inspiration was for your own stage presence and what you were trying to give off.
Loud, funny, and constantly in motion.
Okay, sure. Absolutely.
Good shorts, brief songs.
Yeah.
If we've gone over 2 minutes 30 seconds, it's too long.
Too long. Yep.
Too long.
Yep.
That's it. Just keep it moving.
Yeah. Yeah.
We never did to the extent that the Ramones did, because I had a tendency to stop and chat and tell jokes.
Sure.
Sort of do a porch, but we would do a gig in Tompkins Square Park, and we do. But this thing we've been doing for years and years and years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we do the show, and this old lady comes up to me, and she goes, "I get it. You're a Borscht Belt act." I said, "Lady, I've been doing this for 20 years, and you're the first one who nailed it. First one who got it."
That's funny. Wow. Wow.
That's what we were. We were
Yeah.
a rock and roll Borscht Belt act. I
Sure.
guess you could say a punk Borscht Belt act.
A punk Borscht Belt act. Yeah. Wow.
Unfortunately, the world really wasn't ready for that.
Yeah. That's right. That's right.
Who knew?
Now, were you involved at all in like the different costumes that Tish and Snooki would
No.
put on, or they did whatever they wanted?
They did, but everyone did what they wanted
Yeah,
to do.
I see.
There was no staging. There was
Sure.
no. Every once in a while, we'd try a little dance move.
Yeah, sure.
But that was about the extent of it.
I see.
Try and get the song semi-tight.
I see.
But outside of that, they wore whatever they wanted. It was never an instance like, maybe that's too much, and maybe you shouldn't do that.
Sure. Wow. Now, as that whole scene is, kind of transitioning to the next generation, and some of the newer bands are coming up, what are your thoughts of some of these, what were your thoughts of some of these bands, or your impressions of some of these bands, bands like the Stimulators, or any of these bands that are coming up in like the very late 70s into the early 80s?
Not much.
Yeah.
Ron Swenson, who managed the Plasmatics,
Yeah,
they were doing a gig in Maxis early in their career.
sure.
And he grabs me. He goes, "You got to see this." He plops me in the front row.
Yeah.
And I'm watching them. And I'm thinking, well, it's kind of like the Sick Fucks if they had a lot of money.
Yeah.
And they had a guitar player named Richie Schatz. And I remember prior to that, drinking, he was from Chicago.
Yeah.
White blues player from Chicago. Telling me he would never play this punk shit.
Yeah. Wow. And here you.
So I didn't, but I don't want to say I was losing interest, but I was losing focus on all that.
I see.
Did that already.
I see.
When you start hanging out at CB's or wherever, and you're there more, you feel the tide shifting. You're more there to drink than to see the bands and hang out with people.
I see.
And I could see that happening very slowly but surely.
I see. So by the time like New York hardcore was really hitting its stride, you just weren't particularly interested in.
I was interested. I just didn't want to sit there necessarily. We used to. When Ellie had the the record store next to the club.
Yeah.
And I took a year in the early '90s to try my hand at stand-up comedy.
Okay.
And I ran an open mic at the record store.
Yeah.
Ellie gave me an open mic. And it was Sunday afternoon would be the hardcore. It was fine with me. I didn't care.
Yeah, sure.
But the wannabe comedians were terrified. They would not come. Terrified.
Wow, that's funny.
The kids.
I know.
This guy's 12 years old.
That's right. Were you still hanging around a lot at or I don't know if you ever hung around a lot at like Manic Panic or any of the stores that popped up?
I never worked there.
Yeah.
I would hang out. I would, go, periodically make my rounds on St. Mark's Place.
Sure.
Go into Sounds and see Binky Phillips. Go into the Manic Panic and see the girls.
Yeah.
Go around the corner and see whoever's working there at the time.
Sure.
Yeah, so I spent a good amount of time hanging out there. They had a great opening party. We kind of almost closed off St. Mark's Place. We were in the middle of the summer.
Wow.
All sitting on the stoop drinking.
Wow.
That was a lot of fun.
Wow. And this is, I guess,
77.
just a couple weeks probably before, or a few weeks bore the Sick Fucks first show, right? Wow. Yeah, very busy summer.
Yeah, it was. It was so funny. I mean, it's still hilarious, but it was so funny in
Yeah,
those days.
yeah, yeah. Um, Now, aside from people you've already mentioned who, were from the Bronx and also hung out, or at least were occasionally present downtown, is there anyone else that you remember, in the scene at that time that was from the Bronx?
I gotta think about this for a minute. There weren't a lot of bands from the Bronx.
Yeah, that's right.
I knew he was a smattering of people, but not
Yeah.
even that many.
Yeah,
And they really had a tendency to come more from Queens and Brooklyn.
yeah, yeah, sure. Did you ever meet? I don't even know if they played a live show, much less, or more than a handful. This band called Chain Gang. Did you ever come across them before?
No, it sounds pretty generic.
Yeah, very generic. Yeah, they're one of the only other bands. I think their singer who doesn't even use his government name. It's a pseudonym, Rick Luanda. In the liner notes, they put out a single called "Son of Sam" in 1977.
They're from the Bronx?
The singer is, anyway.
Yeah.
Not the rest of the band. That I don't think so, anyway. But aside from the Dictators, Tish and Snooki, and yourself, at least in that period, I think that's the only other.
Well, Manitoba.
Oh, of course, yeah, Manitoba too. I think that's the only other band that I've come across so far from the 70s.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest luminary, I think, who's Bronx born and bred for me is Richard Price.
Yes, yes. Do you want to talk some about the influence that he had on you, or?
Oh, quite a bit. I mean,
Yeah.
When the Wanderers first came out, it was all this scuttlebutt in the neighborhood. This guy from the Bronx wrote a book about Parkside projects. I mean, really, this is great. And already my mind had been blown by. Took a class in college where I was introduced to Hubert Selby,
Okay, sure.
and that already had blown my mind.
Yeah.
Then I read this, and I've read literally all his books. Price, I've met him several times. He's come to see the band.
Wow. Wow. And it's funny among really, the younger generation of people in gangs, like, in the late 60s, early 70s, who saw that, who eventually saw the movie. A lot of people talk about their love for the movie, but also people doubt the part about the baldies actually being bald.
They were bald.
Lo and behold, yeah, there's photographs you can see of them from the 40s and 50s where
They were bald.
They were bald. Yeah.
It wasn't like they were walking around crew cuts.
Yeah,
They were
yeah.
bald.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
And they were terrifying.
absolutely.
But to us growing up in the hinterlands of Gun Hill projects and stuff like that, Fordham Road was like the Fordham Road, Pelham Parkway.
Yeah. Yep.
the Jewish dream.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. But it was really just executioners in your neighborhood, remnants of the executioners.
Yeah, I mean they weren't very many. By that point, there weren't very many.
Yeah. Now, do you want to talk some about recording with the Sick Fucks and what that, especially the first experience recording, I imagine was probably
the first one. Well, because
something.
the first one was John Cale.
Yeah.
So that's why the first one was the most memorable.
Yeah, sure.
We did like 9 songs in one day. It was supposed to come out on a record label called Spy.
Okay.
And I was heartbroken that it never did.
Yeah.
That it never did. But he just wanted, I remember he just wanted to do them fast. He's very, very aggressive.
Yeah.
And he just wanted to do it fast. And I said, well, John, you want to play piano on this song? No. Come on. So when we finished, he says to me, well, what I wanted to do is get the idea of this band live.
Yeah.
So why don't you just record us live?
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, he kind of gave me a dirty look. Yeah, and then we all went to a steakhouse to celebrate. The girls weren't vegetarians yet at that point, I
I
guess.
see. I see. I see.
And we invited him, he wouldn't come.
Wow.
And then they kept on procrastinating about the record, and it never came out.
Mm.
I mean, I've seen him times after that, and he's been friendly enough.
Yeah. Sure. Sure.
But, you know, the second time we did our own record,
Yeah.
Andy Chernoff was the producer.
Ah, I see. I see. I
And
see. I see.
well, we had a lot of money saved up. It was a nice expense to teach Andy how to produce records.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I didn't really care for it. That was okay.
Yeah. Sure.
You know, doing it, he was trying to do it more like a real record.
Yeah.
So drums were taking 2-3 days, and it just, you know, the experience didn't do much for me.
Sure. Sure. With the first recording, what year was that you?
That was 78.
That was 78.
Easter of 78. We did the recording.
Wow. Wow.
Easter Sunday.
And I guess you've never seen the masters or anything since.
The studio was called Sun Dragon, and they went out of business. No one knows what the masters are.
That's too bad.
I mean, somebody's got them.
Yeah.
There was a collector, not a collector, but a guy named Jim, who used to cassette tape every show at CBGB's.
Okay.
And he passed away, and Lenny Kaye somehow came into his collection, and they wound up donating it to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So it's in
Sure.
their basement somewhere.
I see.
But there are a bunch of, the reason I mention it because there's a bunch of Sic F shows on there.
Sure.
that
I'm
I've
sure
never
there are.
heard.
I'm sure there are. Yeah. Wow. But yeah, it's a shame about that first recording.
Yeah, it was really raw and really kind of amateurish, but it was what it was.
And from what it sounds like, that's the sound you were probably going for.
It was closer.
Anyway.
I would have liked a beefier
I see.
sound,
Sure.
but it was more the sound we were going for.
Sure.
It just was a little thin.
I see.
And then I come to find out years later that's a problem the Stooges had with the first album. Cale produced it. There's all these mixes because
I see.
it sounded really weak.
Wow. Now, why don't you talk some more about the Sick Fucks? I don't know if you want to talk about the horror movie that you all were featured in, or if that's not worth talking about.
It was fun. It was Alone in the Dark. It was shot in a mini mall in New Jersey.
Okay.
We had a couple of songs in it. It took us 8 hours to do that. I remember since we were non-union, the people on the bus, the actors on the bus, who were extras and were union, were all pissed off at us.
Yeah.
I mean, them not liking us at all.
Yeah.
But it was it was a fun experience.
Yeah, sure.
You know, they showed us how they break a storefront window. You know?
That's funny.
The makeup people showed us a lot of stuff. You know, for us, we like kids.
Yeah, sure.
You know, everyone else was these jaded union people who just would get any work they want. We was like, wow, this is the movies.
Yeah. Wow.
And the thing was, we did me, Harry, and Jason did a scene where we're caught by the police, handcuffed and thrown in a police wagon.
Yeah.
Because they thought we were the murderer at first. And that part got cut, but we didn't know that till we went to the premiere.
Wow.
I understand from later on that that's not that uncommon, but
Sure.
But that was a little heartbreaking.
I bet.
But it's still fun to watch, and people, I think in our dossier, it's a thing people look back to and go, "Wow, you were in a movie."
Yeah. It's pretty unique for most bands.
Well, apparently a bunch of bands turned it down before we took it.
No one needs to know that. No.
Yeah, full disclosure.
Yeah. Oh wow. And at what period of time? I mean, I know that the Sick Fucks, still perform occasionally to this day, but at what period of time did those performances get kind of less frequent?
It was very gradual.
Okay.
Very gradual.
Yeah.
And for so many years, we're doing one a year.
Sure.
1 a year, 2 a year, maybe.
Yeah.
But by I'd say the mid '80s at least. It's damn. We're still playing CBGBs.
Sure.
Yeah, probably into the '90s we're playing CBGBs.
Yeah.
But kind of the handwriting was on the wall.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is not going to be what we do. Much more than what it's been already.
Sure. Sure.
It was a blast. I wouldn't change anything for the world, but we weren't going to be Led Zeppelin.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Now, as far as CBGB's itself goes, why don't you talk some about, the final years of that venue, what your relationship with the place was like at the time, how you were experiencing the end of CBGB's.
The final years, truth be told, I didn't go in there very much at all,
Okay.
except to play.
Sure. Sure.
All my people had left.
Yeah.
Battling an alcohol problem on and off.
Sure.
So it wasn't the best place to be.
Absolutely.
I do remember one funny night when my now wife, I met her at the Bottom Line. She was waitress at the Bottom Line. And I'm walking past CBGB's, and I walk past Jeff Magnum and his wife, and they want to go see some band in there. So, okay. So, of course, we know the bartender, who proceeds to get us hammered. And I've got to go pick up my wife at the Bottom Line. Joan Baez is playing at the Bottom Line. And I'm 3 sheets to the wind. And that was the day that she comes to me and goes, well, can I move in with you?
Oh, my God.
And I go like the top of my lungs, go, yeah, that'll be great.
Wow.
That was one of the few last times that but I would stop by in the afternoon a lot to say hello to Hilly, because I loved Hilly.
Sure. Sure.
I always would try and say hello to him,
Sure.
because say what you want about him, he had the foresight to let that thing happen.
Yeah.
in his place.
Yeah.
His genius was almost not to do anything.
Yeah. Sure.
Just let it happen.
Sure.
And that's harder than trying to make something happen sometimes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
God bless him. I mean, he has club owners.
I know.
But yeah, he was special.
Absolutely. Did you go to like the final show or anything like that?
We played the final weekend. We played
played
Friday
the final
night,
weekend, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I didn't go to the final show. I was living upstate in New York at the time.
Okay, I see.
And we didn't have a place to stay. And by that time, I'd gotten pretty sick of Patti Smith.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know if I'm going to be able to deal with this. I
Yeah.
couldn't deal with it as it was.
Yeah, sure.
So I didn't go to the very last show.
Sure. Sure.
I understand Tish broke down in tears when they took the awning down.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I wasn't there.
Yeah. Now, obviously even at the time things had already changed quite a bit, but, in the years since this, the scene in the 70s going into the early 80s came about, have you seen like anything comparable like on the musical landscape in New York that's arisen?
I've seen a lot of people try and say that they were doing something comparable, but
Sure.
no, there was what I think most people don't understand is there was a very special chemistry there.
Yeah.
That maybe it got repeated during the folk boom, but it was very special. People were close. People were friends with each other. I mean, I remember walking into CBGB's with $1 in my pocket, walking out drunk with $10. We would have orphans Christmases, not orphans New Year's because everybody worked,
Yeah, sure.
but orphan Christmases. I remember I'd work at the Bottom Line on a dark night just watching the box office, and people would come over and bring food and cake. And
Yeah.
when Please Kill Me came out,
Yeah.
I go, okay, well, I was probably an eyewitness to at least 40% of this stuff in here. And it's all true. It's not one thing that's a lie.
Yeah, sure.
But there's a whole other side that was going on there that I guess people thought was too boring or too provincial.
Yeah.
But that was the great thing about CBG. I mean, the bands, of course, were great. And
Sure.
without any of these pieces, it probably wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
But it was really nothing like it. And people trying, but even to this day, these are clubs that are still going, like Parkside and Otto's. They'll go, we're New York rock is alive as much as ever been. No, it's not. It's there. First of all, you can't afford to have a band in New York City.
I know.
I remember the Dead Boys living in an apartment in a building that Hilly owned around the corner from CBGB's.
Wow.
So they weren't even paying rent.
Sure.
I mean, now you'd have to have 3 jobs and squeeze the time to play.
I know.
It just but it was the combination of people, personalities, and music.
Yeah.
That put it all together. Plus, I think things were going on everywhere else too.
Yeah.
The art scene was beginning to happen, so there was a lot of cross breeding too.
Sure.
But mainly it was the friendship that people had with each other.
Yeah.
More than anything.
Yeah. Now, you already mentioned that there weren't necessarily a whole lot of people from the Bronx that were a part of this scene or anything like that. But as far as the Bronx people went, do you think that there's anything unique or specific that, you, Tish, Snooki, Richard, Scott, Ross brought to the table being from the Bronx?
Yes, there is, but they'd be more like intangibles. There's a
Okay.
Bronx. They all brought a Bronx attitude, which is very specific.
Sure.
It's probably the most sarcastic borough in the city.
Yeah. It's very true.
But it's also it's very homey in a way.
Yeah.
So it's unique, but it's more like the attitude is what's unique.
Sure.
It's a very specific Bronx attitude. It's not a Brooklyn attitude. It's not a Queens attitude.
Yeah.
As much as I love the Ramones, they were kind of play acting.
Yeah. Sure.
We weren't necessarily trying to be tough guys. We were trying to be just like Jews who wanted to be tough guys.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like, before punk rock, a Jew would want to be an Italian, they want to be in the mafia.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now we want to be in a punk band.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And one of the things that Tish and Snooki brought up is that, there was maybe more of a focus on having fun and, the levity of it all, as opposed to, there's obviously some bands in the scene at the time that took themselves very, very, very seriously.
Well, there were too many. In fact, that's one of the big reasons the Sic Fuck started. Is that, besides me, I can do that.
Yeah.
But they're all getting so serious.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
It's show business.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
That was a big inclination when I started the band.
Yeah, sure.
Really, had a lot. Yeah, everyone was getting so. Because people starting to take punk way too seriously.
Yeah. Now, I know that there's many other aspects of your life that we haven't spoken about yet. Too many, as is the case with everyone, to fit into a single interview. But I want to give you, the opportunity now, if there's aspects of your life, whether music or non-music related, that you want to share, that you haven't had a chance to talk about, that you feel that's important for people to understand your story.
Then that would require some thought.
Yeah.
Nothing pops into my head, unfortunately.
Nothing pops into your head. That's fine. If at any point it does down the line, then we can always record more. But with some people, there's a burning, they might have a burning thing they haven't shared yet that they haven't had a chance to share.
I'll tell you, had you called me 20 years ago, yeah, that might have been.
Sure.
I've kind of just resolved. I've made my peace with the world by now. I'm 71 years old.
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, the final question I have for you, and you've touched on it, in passing already throughout the interview, but what does the Bronx represent to you?
A lot of things. Childhood.
Yeah.
Just unique. It's a unique place. I think everyone who lives in the Bronx could spend a couple of days outside of the Bronx to see how different the world is. And I think people would, as bad as things might be sometimes, appreciate what they've got here.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they're you know, that they're complaining about this, that, and the other thing. But I'm just saying there's a uniqueness here, and just adopt it, embrace it,
Yeah.
because you're not going to find it anywhere else.
Yeah. That's right. Well, Russell, thank you so much for, sharing part of your story today. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. My pleasure.